Hey, how's it going everybody? It's Sketch and welcome back to the channel. And on today's show we're looking at the Vasara Collection, which features Vasara 1 and 2. This is a vertical shoot 'em up series developed and published by Visco Corp for the arcade in 2000. Visco Games also developed the fighting game series Breakers, which released a few years prior, which is also awesome. The collection released in August of 2019, ported by QUByte Interactive, and this release would also mark its first time being seen outside of the arcades, and it's a welcome addition to the roster. After going through several shoot 'em ups on the Xbox catalog, this was a standout along with the many cave shooters we covered recently. So let's check out the story real quick and see what's up here. In an alternate timeline of feudal era Japan, the current ruler is plotting a hostile takeover after the passing of the previous Hideyoshi Hashiba, and three warriors aim to veto their ambitions. The mission is to carve through each warlord and their legions in order to stop Emperor Tokugawa from assuming power one ballistic round at a time. This is an interesting mix of feudal era Japan mixed with hovercraft and giant mechanized warriors that tower above everything. This has a similar look and feel to games like Robo Alesta or Musha. Between the two games there are a total of 18 stages to complete, with a roster of 7 playable characters between both titles. Both games feature several different modes of play, including their original arcade coin-op modes. Gameplay wise, you've got a vertical 2D shoot 'em up where you have 3 means of attack. You've got your standard shot and a chargeable melee attack which inflicts heavy damage and reflects certain enemy projectiles. You've also got your Vasara burst, which works as a blade barrage for several seconds, which will put in work if it all connects. Vasara 1 has 6 challenging stages as you comb the area of various troops and warlords while collecting as many power-ups as you can. The first stage really doesn't waste any time before throwing a lot of enemy fire at you, and one hit is all it takes to take you down. Later levels get pretty intense with the numerous waves of enemies and bullet hell levels of gunfire, so figuring out angles and frames where you can sit at safely are pretty crucial here. Figuring out which enemies to focus on also comes to the equation, since certain enemy types have higher defense or require double taps to wipe both forms from the board. Certain enemies will also be much more aggressive than others and try to push you into enemy gunfire as well, so crowd control is an important aspect to keep in mind here. Vasara 1 has 6 levels that ramp up in difficulty rather quick, and stage 6 requires getting through the level without losing all your lives, since you can't use continues as freely as the previous stages, similar to the final stages of Aero Fighters 1 and 2. Vasara 2 has 12 stages with 2 routes, easy which has 6 levels and hard which has all 12. The same rule applies here with Vasara 2 as well on its final stages, so proficiency with the game's available arsenal, along with getting good with dodging and keeping your burst levels full, is the main takeaway in getting further without taking too much damage here, even though it's going to happen eventually. Each craft has its own set of attributes, with some being more balanced and others being more geared towards speed or firepower. Your craft can collide with enemies and objects without taking damage, but one hit or swipe from an enemy and it's a wrap. You also get a burst gauge that can be refilled with gems that drop from fallen enemies in Vasara 1 that can only be used once per life, whereas in Vasara 2 you get 3 stacks per life, which can either be stacked or used in rapid succession for heavy sustained damage. The Timeless mode is a remix and graphical update offering a 2.5D look with an additional playable boss character and an ultra widescreen perspective for up to 4 players, where the boss encounters are randomized and players are allowed 1 stock of lives that can be extended, but once they're out, it's game over. This mode is a lot of fun and very challenging, especially trying to tackle it solo. Along with the original arcade titles, this mode definitely rounds out a solid assortment. Graphics wise, the original coin-ops have a 2D hand-drawn feel. As you go through the 2 games, it's almost like playing through a movie or a comic book with the game's hand-drawn cutscenes. Aside from the on-screen action, it's got a really cinematic feel to it. Environments have an astonishing amount of detail, from the textures of the rooftops and grassy hillsides to the massive boss and enemy sprites. The Mecha Shogun creations seen here are really interesting and have some great animations and effects work. Both games have a really bright color palette, and stages have a lot of lush animation and often destructible parts. The style reminds me a lot of how the team animated Metal Slug's levels and backgrounds, with high contrast detail and several scrolling techniques. The Timeless mode goes for more of the route that Under Defeat did, with its reworked polygon sprites and 3D backgrounds, which also have a lot of nice lighting effects and animations. This mode also features intros for each boss encounter that actually remodels all their crafts in 3D, and that part looks pretty sick. Bullet patterns are plenty here, and there's no shortage of formations of fire and seemingly endless waves of enemy sprites that will be barreling at you, but it's a smooth experience without much in the way of graphical hiccups between all modes. Even when things are going insane at times visually, it holds up. Sound wise, these games also have some great audio. I recently played through all of these again with a headset and it bumps, especially with the sound effects. Explosions in this game were designed with some serious bass in mind, and it's very much appreciated. This, along with the sounds sounds of endless gunfire, parrying steel, and the booms of the Shogun warlords all sound really good here. The game soundtrack is also pretty dope, with an energetic mix that carries the action well throughout. It has a vibe that's faithful to the period while also adding some modern conventions, and it all sounds good with a full range of hype to more foreboding compositions. I know I've compared games to the movie Versus before, but this one has a very similar feel to how that film soundtrack kind of paced with the music and action. Overall, the Vasara Collection is a great assortment of vertical shooters. Each title in the series is challenging yet fair, and they've all got a good bit of replay value to run through the campaign to see the various character endings as well as top that last high score. It's crazy to think it took 19 years before this saw a console release, but hey, better late than never. If you're even remotely into vertical shooters, this is a solid choice to look into. The Vasara Collection gets an 8.5 out of 10 and comes recommended to fans of shoot 'em up games and arcade coin-op conversions, since this is a solid collection and has hours of fun and challenge to offer. It will be great to see some of Visco Corp's other titles get a re-release, especially Breakers, and maybe if this catches enough traction, that can be a possibility somewhere down the line. This collection is available on the Xbox One and Series X, along with the PS4 and 5, Nintendo Switch, and PC. And thank you again for checking out this video. If you find these videos helpful, that's awesome. I'm glad you can use it as a resource. Check back often. We'll have more reviews and commentaries coming up in the near future. But until then, take it easy and stay safe out there. I'll see you on the next one.